Success is the intersection of timing, hard work, luck, and skill. And when those four converge, then you have the outcome you're looking for. It's much easier when you have nothing to lose as a first-time entrepreneur than somebody who has proven themselves in the past and then looking to do another business. The trend is your friend. The more you put yourself out there, the more withdrawals you are making in your life.
Dude, thank you for joining me. I'm excited to have this conversation. We know each other quite well, but I know I'm going to learn some new things because friends never really sit down and just grill each other on interesting topics, or just it doesn't happen that often. So I'm excited to do this.
I'm excited as well.
Nice, man. You're an incredibly successful entrepreneur, a good parent, but you got fired from your first job. I heard on one of the podcasts that I was listening to. What happened?
Well, I have to say that I got fired from my first job. It was really embarrassing, but I have to say it's a bucket list item that everyone should experience at some time in their life or their career.
Yeah.
Thankfully for me, it was the first job, not an important job, so I was able to bounce back pretty quickly. But just to kind of rewind a little bit, when I was in high school, my grandfather, who was in the textile industry and was watching what was happening in China in the 80s and the 90s, he would tell me as a child, "Hey, Cole, you really, really need to go to China. The next century is going to be the Chinese century. It's a really important place." He was seeing the growth firsthand. And I remember when he called me in 2001 and he said, "Cole, China is now in the WTO. They just got let in. And 100 years from now, when everyone looks back, they're going to say this was the moment where the Chinese century really began." And so when I was in college, or I should say when I was getting ready to graduate from college, I really wanted to go to China and move there permanently, at least for a short period of time. And what ended up happening is that I couldn't really find a job from the US. And so it was either I moved to China to find a job, which seemed like a very scary proposition, or just get a job in the US. And I was able to interview and find a job at a major asset manager. And the pay, I remember, was $60,000 a year, which, I was going to get platinum teeth. It seemed like an infinite amount of money.
Right.
And so I ended up taking that job because it seemed like the less risky, the more sure bet. And as soon as I got to the company, it was pretty clear, A, didn't really like what I was doing, didn't like my job. And then somebody had told me early on that I should look at my boss and say to myself, if 5-10 years from now, if I want to be in that person's shoes, then I'm going down the right track. But if not, most likely it's not the right company or maybe not the right industry. And it was very clear from the start that it wasn't the right fit for me. And as a result, I didn't feel like I was an owner in the business, and I didn't really approach the business as if it was something that I wanted to do long term. And it showed in the performance. And as a result, one day I got a call, was told to go into the office, and then they said, "See ya.
See you later, Cole." You probably don't know this about me, but I also got fired from my first job, which I don't talk about much. But I do think most entrepreneurs are just bad employees. We don't do well with authority. Like you said, we want to work for ourselves. We want to build value. And I actually call this the wildfire principle. I remember learning in college that when there's wildfires, of course it's devastating for us and our homes, et cetera. But it's actually a really good thing in nature because what it does is it removes all of this invasive brush, basically, and it clears the room and clears the space so that water and resources and sun can hit the trees, and the trees can kind of grow into these nice forests. So I think it's kind of the same thing that you described with work, right? If it's a bad fit, it may hurt in the moment, but it opens you up to all of these other great opportunities like we saw.
Absolutely. I mean, when a door closes, most of the time a new door opens. So
yeah,
I couldn't agree more.
You just have to find where those other doors are sometimes.
You have to knock on a lot of doors.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about your grandfather. I want to hear about your kind of family story and who is Cole today and where did you come from?
Sure. I grew up in a very loving family in the suburbs of New Jersey. It was somewhat boring, but certainly no trauma, and a situation where I felt like I always had a kind of fallback plan on my parents if, God forbid, something bad happened. And my grandfather was very much a kind of a mentor in my life. He was entrepreneurial He had started a few businesses, and later in his life had become the CEO of a company that was, as I mentioned, in the textile business. And so he was running that, and was very much somebody in my life who pushed me to do something entrepreneurial.
Did he start that company?
Did he start the company?
Yeah.
No, he didn't. He had a family business. It's kind of a funny story. He had married into a family that owned a jewelry store.
Okay, so your grandfather works at this textile company, inspires you to be an entrepreneur, but give me the family lineage. Like what happened before your parents got to New Jersey? Connect the dots for me.
Okay, so my family, like a lot of Eastern European families who were Jewish, they looked around and they said, there's pogroms happening. This is not the place for us. And then they pieced out and came to Ellis Island, and then went to New York and kind of started from scratch. And, it's kind of sad because a lot of times you hear people who have this great heritage and this great feeling towards the fact that they've got Italian roots, Mexican roots, or what have you. But I think when our family moved to the U.S., which was about 120 years ago, it's been a while now, they really wanted to do, similar to what you said with the wildfire, a great reset. So we really have very little understanding of what life was like and who our family was, prior to coming to the U.S. My family, two things I would say. One is that they worked very hard. They started a jewelry store in Manhattan, which ultimately my great-grandmother, her ex-husband, one day decided that he wanted the family jewels, and so he robbed the store in the middle of the night.
No way.
And then moved to Florida and made off with all the jewelry. So
wow, like Madoff. Jesus.
Exactly, basically.
Yeah.
His last name was Noodleman.
Okay.
And thankfully, when my great-grandmother remarried, my grandfather changed his name to his new father, which is Zucker. So thankfully, I'm not Noodleman.
Yeah.
Because I think that would have been cause for a lot of teasing growing up. So that happened. And then the other thing is that there was some people in my family who were part of the Gambino mafia, and there's a great New York Times article written about my uncle who was a bookie there, and he spent about 5 years in Rikers. So it was an interesting family dynamic growing up, but certainly one of love and care, which is something that I apply, minus the Gambino family part, to my child.
What was the uncle's name who went to Rikers?
Seymour.
What did he go to Rikers for? Or what's the story behind that?
I don't really know that much information. I just remember when I was very young, maybe 5 years old, he came to our house with like a duffel bag full of money, and he said to my mom, I'm going away for a little while. My mom was fully aware it was happening because it was pretty big news when he was arrested. But he said, take this. You can take a little bit out, but don't go crazy. At some point, I'm going to need this back. And I assume he probably did that with, a number of people in the family where he wanted to kind of keep cash off to the side.
Wow, fascinating backstory. Okay, so your parents not in the mob, I assume. What did they do for work? Like, what was your life like?
My mom is a teacher. She's about to hit 25 years at public school in New Jersey. We
need more committed people like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the biggest challenges that the U.S. is going to have to deal with going forward. I mean, a lack of educational talent around teachers. So potential business to buy and scale. But yeah, so she was an ESL teacher, among other things. And then my dad is a lawyer. He represents amusement parks. So if somebody dies on a ride, he represents the park, not the victim.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. It's mostly insurance law. I mean, at that point, it's just a matter of negotiating how much the settlement's going to be.
Sure.
But it was interesting because we got to go to Six Flags for free a lot as a kid. And you'd think I'd love roller coasters, but unfortunately, not my thing.
Not your thing? It used to be my thing, and as I got older, I think I've just gotten scared about everything. Like my anxiety level, my fear level has gone up. And my excitement level for doing those crazy things has gone way down.
Do you think it has anything to do with the fact that you're more risk on as it relates to your business? So maybe on your personal life, you want to be a little risk off.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it probably has more to do with like family. You know, I have like a fiance now. I see like a future with a family. So it's no longer just like me and my selfish self, and therefore I'm a little more risk off with myself.
It's a good place to be.
Yeah.
For someone that's married and has a kid, I have to say, happy wife, happy life is a very important thing to subscribe to. But the more you put yourself out there, the more withdrawals you are making in your life. And, in the end of the day, it's all about kind of finding that equilibrium with your partner of deposits and withdrawals. And I don't think it's worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. I totally get that. And speaking of equilibrium, so you're at Prudential. You're totally out of equilibrium, right? You just got fired.
Yeah.
Are you like, what are your feelings back then? Are you like embarrassed? Are you lost? Or are you just like, that was great. Like, I feel pretty good. I'm going to go to China now. How did you feel?
Yeah, it was like all the emotions you just mentioned. I mean, it was a lot of pain, and I felt to a certain degree that I was not capable of really holding any type of job. I remember wanting to bounce back immediately and find a similar type of job, even though I'd secretly wanted to go to China. I was still not fully prepared to take that kind of risk, the risk of moving to China. So what I ended up doing is I interviewed at a number of different firms, and I do distinctly remember one. It was Omni Media, which is Martha Stewart Living, and it was in their finance department. And I remember walking in on the floor, and it was full of cubicles and people who I'd say were kind of dead from the neck up, and thinking, oh my God, is this the rest of my life? I mean, am I going to live this life of misery and sadness and monotony? Because it doesn't seem like, given where I am, and thinking that I've got potentially 80 years remaining in my life, that is not the life that I was envisioning. And so that was a moment for me where I said, okay, well, you only have one life, and you only have so many chances. And so at that point I said, I need to buy a one-way ticket to China and just kind of figure out what's going on there and see if I can find an opportunity for myself.
Okay. And from what I remember reading, you land in China, you're going door to door with your resume, looking for a job, and you end up landing a job with a company that is like a floor manufacturer, or like a floor and light manufacturer, maybe? Is that right?
You got it, yep.
Yeah. And I think I also remember hearing that you were the first English-speaking employee that they had.
Yeah, I mean, my intention was to become fluent in Mandarin. Yeah. Nothing else really mattered. And so the target for me was to find a company where I'd be able to speak Chinese all day long. And in the beginning, I printed out my resume, and I would just kind of hang out in kind of expat locales, and then wait for expats to leave their offices during lunch. And I'd walk up to them and say, hey, is your firm looking for somebody who looks like myself and has my skill set? And I'd hand them my resume, and that didn't really work. It wasn't very effective. But at some point, I was able to kind of network myself into this opportunity where it was a building material manufacturer. And I remember distinctly the boss said, hey, you are going to be the first foreign hire, the only person in the company that speaks English. And so if you're prepared for that, then the job is yours. And it was an immediate yes. I said yes before I even knew what the salary was going to be. So I was pretty gung-ho and excited about the opportunity.
How long was it before you could communicate enough with the employees to add value in that company?
It took about a year. Yeah. So it was a lot of,
You were getting paid what you were worth then.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I feel like at that point I was actually getting paid to learn Mandarin. Yeah. I would really kind of leverage the team to practice Chinese, as opposed to really ask them anything that was relevant or provide any real value for the organization.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the company you built and sold very successfully. But I want to stop on this because, I think a lot about creating luck in your life and picking the right experiences. Mm-hmm. And if you were talking to like a younger Cole or any other young person listening to this, what advice do you have around making those types of choices and really increasing your surface area of luck by picking the right experiences?
Yeah, it's a great question. I like to think that success is the intersection of timing, hard work, luck, and skill. And when those four converge, then you have the outcome you're looking for. And the way to get there is, especially in the early days of your career, is optimizing for the amount of opportunities you can take on goal. So the way I think about it is, shots on goal is the way to really find your increased surface area of luck. So saying yes to everything, or as much as you possibly can, that's definitely a big one for me. But the other one is understanding that in the end of the day, a lot of success comes down to who you know, not what you know. I know this is a cliche, a lot of people talk about it, but it really just takes one interaction to fully change the trajectory of your life. And so trying to build your network early is something that I can't emphasize enough, because you might be selling light bulbs and all of a sudden somebody says, okay, I'll buy, I'm in, and hands you a purchase order that changes the total track of the company. And had you not met that one person, then you may not have found yourself with the same outcome. So that would be my recommendation for anyone who is young, is to really focus on their network and building that as much as they can.
And I feel like I see you actively living this value even today. Like, you've been very successful, you've had a great journey, but I see you getting active. I see you getting out there. I see you meeting people. I see you being curious. Can you talk a little bit about how you're picking and choosing, especially now that you're like a father and you're busy with other activities, how do you pick and choose what's high leverage without saying yes to everything?
It's a really difficult thing to do, and sometimes you find yourself in a situation where you may have said yes when you probably should have said no. So I think before I was always defaulting to yes. So if it was an event, if it was a coffee with somebody who I didn't really know, it was always sure, no problem. But now there are certain time constraints that I have to work through, and so as a result, I have to be a lot pickier with the people that I meet, or the people that I potentially partner with. And so, yeah, I mean, I think one of my challenges is I thrive off of meeting people, hearing their story, learning about what they've done to be successful, what gets them going. But there are only so many hours in a day. So when I sold my company, I was very fortunate that I spent the first, let's say, year really doing nothing but networking. So I made sure that I could get in front of as many people as possible. And I felt like that, to a certain degree, was a great way to build my network. And so I feel like now I'm probably one or two connections away from really anyone that I want to meet. And so now that base is built, if there is somebody that I want to interact with, I feel like I can get there, as opposed to feeling like I need to get in front of everyone in order to build that foundation.
Yeah. I feel like some people listening to this podcast, when they hear the word networking, it feels transactional to them. It feels kind of like dirty, even though it shouldn't. I don't have that feeling, but I've definitely heard people express that. How do you go through the act of, like, what advice do you have around just networking in general, or going through that process and it not feeling icky for anyone or transactional?
Yeah, I mean, you go to these events or you meet people. One of the most important things to do is to not have an ask, or not to feel like you want something from them. It's all about getting to know them. It's about learning about their family, asking them questions, showing real interest and curiosity in the individual, and building that relationship. And when it came to building the company, we interacted with a lot of distributors to get them online to buy our products. And so I made a point to asking everyone about their kids' names, and really trying to get to know them and show that I actually care. And if you do that in a genuine way, or in a way that shows that you're an authentic human, in the future, if you do have an ask, it's a lot easier to ask it, and it's a lot easier for that person to be able to kind of swallow your ask and say, okay, I'm willing to help because I like Cole and I want him to be successful.
Absolutely. I once listened to a talk by, I think his name was Doug Atkins or something. He was the head of Airbnb's community, and he talked about a commitment curve where, the thing that Airbnb struggled early on with is getting hosts to open up their house for strangers to sleep in, right? And vice versa, but really more so on the host side. And he said, look, you can't just go to a host and say, hey, can you open your door for a stranger to stay in? You have to take them up this commitment curve. And what starts with an email or like an introductory video or some article about an Airbnb host having a good experience, little by little, you're giving them enough information and getting a bigger commitment from them until at the end of the curve, you can get them to host their house on Airbnb and have that good experience with them and, get good 5-star ratings and make a bunch of money. And when you were telling me about your networking strategy, it made me think of that, right? Is like really just be human, build a relationship, really care about people. And then maybe one day in the future, it could be years later, that may pay off for you if you do it enough times.
Absolutely. And I think that most people have kind of their antennas out when you first interact with them. And if they can smell that you're looking for something from them, it's a transactional type of relationship. They are very quick to shut you down. So it's important that you are aware that when you go to meet somebody, that you do not have an ask or make it seem as though you will have an ask in the future.
Yeah, that's a great point. So let's go back to your company for a bit. The year's 2009. You're thinking of or starting an LED company. What did you learn at the business in China that you feel gave you the right resources to start this business?
Yeah, going to China was one of the best things I ever did in terms of just decisions, partially because China at the time was growing very quickly, and it was transitioning from a country where they were just manufacturing products on behalf of others to manufacturing their own products and really starting to innovate and build their own brands. And so I would say that when I arrived, it was somewhat of an accelerator, a career accelerator for me, because middle management was a concept that really didn't enter the Chinese mindset until really in the last 5 years, because there really haven't been that many managers that have gone up the ranks, because the company's only been developing for so many decades, and obviously it takes time to understand what it means to be a manager. So it was one of those things, sink or swim. Of course, the language was one piece, but as I was helping to grow the company that I was with, or grow within the company, there were just a lot of different responsibilities that were thrown my way. One of the things that I realized, which was one of the catalysts for starting my own company, was that I felt like my boss was really not much different from me in terms of, I'd say, intelligence. He had a lot more cars than I did, and the reason he did was because he was willing to take a risk at some point and bet on himself and build his own business. And I felt like, I was still young. I was, I think, 24 or 25 at the time, but I felt like I needed to take a similar type of risk, because if he could do it, I could certainly do it. And so that was a big reason as to why I decided to take the step.
Yeah. So you're working at this company, and some of the observations that I've had is that you are working, you're going to work, you're working hard, you're probably doing a good job because you worked there for many years, but you also have your eyes open. So the story you just shared about working there and observing that the owner of the company owned a bunch of cars and was wealthy. Why was that? Because at some point he took a risk. The other story that I remember listening to is that you read an article or maybe spoke with somebody in and around 2009 and learned that in Japan, the LED market was exploding. And the article basically predicted that the same was going to happen in the US. Incandescent light bulbs were going to become LED light bulbs in the majority, but it hadn't happened yet. So you're working at this company, you're learning all of these skills, you're building up your Chinese language, which I'm sure was useful later on, but you're also triangulating off of information in the real world. Do you have any insights or kind of comments for people that have a full-time job, that are interested in being entrepreneurs in the future, and maybe they won't make the jump tomorrow or a year from now, but a few years from now? How should they be thinking about their day-to-day life?
Yeah, I'd say the trend is your friend. In the end of the day, one of the reasons why we were successful was because we rode this wave, this LED lighting wave. At the time that we started, there's something like 8 billion sockets in the U.S. that were going to get replaced to LED. And at the time, market penetration was really like 0.0001%. I think the year before we started, something like 500,000 LED lights were sold in the U.S., which is really nothing relative to the size of the market. So we knew that there was going to be this huge growth within the industry, and we wanted to capitalize on it. So if you're looking at an industry or looking at starting your own business, I think that considering what the trends look like is a really important factor. And really diving deep into understanding what the market is going to look like 3, 5, 10 years from now, so that you can be an expert in getting in front of the trend and building a brand or something that is more value add.
I really like that. I really, really like that, because entrepreneurship is so freaking hard that if you're also swimming upstream, like against the current, it's just so much harder. And I've personally been there as an entrepreneur. Whereas like if you were swimming downstream, or, like the wave picks up and pushes you, it can really change your life, right?
Absolutely. And one of the major things is around disruption, especially around when you have an industry where you have kind of a few major players who are really big and everyone else is really tiny. Like the lighting industry, you have GE, Philips, and Osram are kind of 80% of the market share. When you have a big shift in technology, what occurs is the distribution channels become somewhat willing to try out new vendors, new products. And if that tectonic shift hadn't occurred, coming in and saying, hey, we're this new brand with these new products, a lot of times, especially if it wasn't the right timing, the distribution channel would have said, like, that's nice, but we're not interested because we're happy with our current vendors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one thing that I have a question about. It feels like by 2009, I mean, I can remember 2009. I feel like LED technology had been around for a while. Mm-hmm. Like if I was in your shoes but lacking the experience, I would have thought, LED technology feels like a commodity. I'm sure everyone's just going to have it in their homes soon, but how can I compete? How can I carve out a piece? And are there 15 other Coles in China right now that are going to be importing LED lights? Were you scared, or were you just like so new to it that it didn't cross your mind, or you really felt confident in your strategy and perhaps you weren't scared at all?
I think that we were coming from the benefit of being pretty young and naive, and not recognizing
it's a superpower.
It is a superpower. I mean, the ability to run through a wall and not think about what that wall is going to do to you before you start the jump is something that really empowers a lot of entrepreneurs to be very successful, because if they knew what the risks really entailed, what the journey was going to look like, a lot of people probably wouldn't have taken off for that quest. When we were just starting, it was very clear that the market was shifting, but because we were in China, we had the benefit of seeing what was happening on the manufacturing side. And Philips, for example, had a very challenged supply chain at that time, where if you wanted the product to be launched in 18 to 24 months, it would be somewhat of a pipe dream, because you had the product managers in Brazil and the lawyers in the Netherlands and the engineering in parts of Australia. And it was so disjointed in terms of the way they launched new products that it was pretty apparent that it was going to take them a long time to really catch up to the technology that was happening in the market. Mm-hmm. And so we felt like there was an opportunity in 2009, 2010, because the market at that point was really these small players who made really crappy LED products. And so we felt like if we came in, built a premium LED product line, we could really build a brand and position ourselves in a way that we could differentiate from the rest of the market.
Got it. Yeah. So a combination somewhere in the Venn diagram of naivete plus an actual unique insight that you got from working years in that industry. It really benefited you.
Exactly.
I do want to know, do you remember what the hardest or darkest time building that company was?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, there were a number of really dark
I'm
times.
sure.
There were a lot of times where we thought that this was the end, the business was dead, and it was time to polish the resume and get back to the job market. Live at my parents' house. I would say the thing that got me the most was when we were starting to see success, and we decided that. So as I just hinted, we built a premium product. We really wanted to be the Mercedes-Benz of the industry. We wanted longer lifetimes, higher quality of light. We wanted our distribution channel to say that when we want to sell a really great product that's going to go into a high-end retailer, boutique, or hotel, they're going to use Green Creative's products. And we were watching the volumes that were happening on the Toyota Precision LED products, and we said, well, we can just reduce the lifetime. We can use cheaper materials. We can also sell very similar products.
Yeah,
and
you
so
can go down market if
we
you
can go
want.
down market. And
Yeah.
we had an A line, and we said, why don't we create this B line of inferior product and take out the competition with a product line which is even better and cheaper than what's being sold. And we launched this B line, and it was initially fairly successful. And we thought, okay, well, seems like people want this product. And so we decided to be cowboys. And I remember having a conversation with my partner and saying, let's just go for it, and we'll go for broke, and I'm sure it's going to work out. And we completely tapped our working capital line of credit. And at some point, we realized that we had a few $1,000,000 worth of product that was coming in on the ocean. But after those initial wave of sales, they really started to slow dramatically. And we realized we had a big problem because we had hundreds of thousands of units of merchandise coming to our warehouses, and no demand whatsoever. And so there were a number of things that we had to do to kind of fix the problem, but we were finding ourselves in a situation where we were considering having to tell our employees that we weren't going to make payroll.
So what did you do with the few $1,000,000 worth of lights? Sell, sell, sell?
Yeah, I mean, part of it was sell, sell, sell. The first thing we did was we told our suppliers that, hey, we're really sorry that we are not going to be able to pay you on time for the merchandise. We also have other orders that are in the pipeline on products that we sell day in, day out. That's going to take a little while for the products to come, but we need you to ship those, even though we haven't paid for the ones that are in front of those orders. Because we have a serious cash flow issue. So we're very much in communication day one, as soon as we identified the issue with our suppliers. And then on the distributor side, on our customer side, we kind of had to explain the situation to them so that they would pay us faster. Usually we were net 30 or net 60-day terms. And so we really kind of begged and pleaded with them and used some of our goodwill. And then the other thing is, to your point, sell, sell, sell. So it was 50, 60, 70% off, whatever it took to get those products out of the warehouse. But it was very impactful because it really hurt our ability to grow for a short period of time. And at the same point, we really didn't know if the business was going to survive because we thought we were going to be sitting on all this merchandise with nothing to do.
Yeah. And I guess fast forward to the end. Tell us the good stuff. You sell the business. What does that look like for you? And what did you learn about the sales process?
Yeah. So we grew quickly. Part of it was we rode this LED wave. Part of it was we built a great team. We had an amazing brand that we were able to establish in the industry. I would say, just quickly, side story, one of the biggest catalysts for our growth was that there was a player who was basically doing exactly what we wanted to do. They were a couple of years ahead of us, and they were very fast out of the gate, very successful. And essentially, what ended up happening is that they were too successful, and they couldn't get enough supply to meet the demand. And then at some point, the founder was riding his bike one day, and he had this freak accident and fell and then hit his head and died. It was tragic, horrible. But that actually kind of put the business into a tailspin, and we somehow became kind of the next in line to be considered as that premium product line. And so Sorry, I don't know where I'm going with this, but
No, it's an interesting story. Run with it.
so I mean, coming down to like timing and luck, and I don't want to say that this guy's passing was good fortune, but certainly had that business not become challenged, we wouldn't have been in a position where we could grow from 2 million to 8 million to 24 to 40 to 60 million
Wow.
over a very short period of time. And at some point, myself and my partner, realized that the business was no longer in build mode. It was more in operate mode. And while we saw an opportunity to continue to grow, we had a great team around us, a C-suite. We had really great processes, a very strong system. And we knew that the people who would be best to run this type of business were those who did this for a living, career CEOs. And so we didn't necessarily want to hire somebody and have them manage the business. We felt like it was better in the hands of potentially private equity fund or strategic. And so from that decision, we decided to hire a banker and then go out to market and run a full process.
So you sell the business for 9 figures, and then what happens? You move to Italy, you buy a yacht, you buy 10 houses. What did you do next?
I was obviously on a high after we sold the company. It was
Sure.
a really exciting moment
And it was just
my
two
life.
of you partners. So yeah.
Yeah, it was just the two of us.
Okay.
And then what ended up happening is I started to get somewhat bored and felt like I was lacking purpose and really didn't know what to do next. So it was a moment where I felt like I'd realized a goal. I'd completely destroyed my expectations in terms of where I was going to be financially, success, what that looked like to me at the age of I think 31, which is when we sold. But at the same point, I was kind of in a bit of a crisis internally because I really didn't know how to define myself as an operator in terms of what I wanted to do in the future. And a lot of entrepreneurs who've had one exit, two things happen. One is that they're very successful in their next gig, but a lot of times what you end up finding is that either they kind of waited out their non-compete and then kind of did it again, or B, they did something very similar to what they were doing before, and so they kind of just took this formula and then rewrote it. Or B, the other thing that you see a lot of times when it comes to entrepreneurs is that they either raise a lot of money or they use a lot of their money and they think that they can do it again, but then they get into the arena, they get punched in the face a few times and they say, yeah, this is not for me. I don't need this anymore because starting another company is really tough. So I grappled with that. That was a tough moment after we sold.
Before we move on to that, because I do want to talk a little bit about that next journey, what's the most outlandish thing you bought after you sold your company?
Oof. Well, I got into watches. That was a thing.
Yeah.
And so I would say the ownership of a few APs and Rolexes was probably the most outlandish. So I didn't go crazy. But at some point I realized you have two wrists and you only use one for telling the time. And most of the time it's an iPhone. So I did start to go down this journey of accumulating material wealth. But very quickly I realized I had nothing to really prove to myself because I felt like the success of the business and the journey was in and of itself really gratifying. And so I didn't feel like outward material wealth was necessary to gain personal satisfaction.
Your parents have pretty traditional jobs. Your mother's a teacher, your dad is a lawyer, and you did this totally out of the box thing. You move to China, you start a company, you sell it for 9 figures. What is their experience? What do they think of this whole thing?
My mom, very early on when we started the company, was sending me LSAT applications and law school applications. She really wanted me to get my professional degree. And there was a time where she called me and she said, okay, this entrepreneur thing, like, it's been fun, but, it's done. Like, let's go the traditional way.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of resistance in the beginning, but at some point they realized that I'm built differently than them. And so they were very much, cheering me on and supportive once they realized the success of what we were doing.
Was it hard for them to grasp the outcome of the journey?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people look at things through their own personal lens, and so there's certain things that they understand, certain things that they won't get. I mean, it's the same thing. It's just a relatability, but when I'm with my friends from high school, the people that I grew up with, I mean, I love them, but it's certainly harder for me to talk to them about some of my challenges versus their challenges because there's just been a bit of a chasm
Sure.
that's opened up as it relates to just where we are in life. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but yeah, it's more challenging.
Yeah, I totally get that. And my parents first, and then my grandparents for years into my entrepreneurial journey were like, hey, so my daughter's friend works at Microsoft for Bill Gates, and they're like the 10,000th employee, VP so-and-so. And they were like, hint, hint, like you should see if you can get a job through them. And I'm just like, I get it. They come from the Soviet Union. Like there were only government jobs. So the best case scenario for them, for their sweet grandchild is to work for Microsoft or Google.
Absolutely.
But for me, it wasn't even something that I could consider. And my parents came around eventually, but I think my grandparents still now 20 years later, wish I worked at Google or something.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that. One of the things that I've seen when it comes to Seattle versus like San Francisco, for example, is because of Amazon and Microsoft and a number of these very large tech companies there, you have a lot of very well-paid executives, and I think as a result, because it's so, not to say it's easy to get a job there, but that's a natural kind of safety blanket.
Yeah.
A lot of people who could become entrepreneurs end up staying at Microsoft their entire careers because they enjoy the lifestyle and the salary, and they don't want to take on that risk. So as a result, Seattle hasn't really become an entrepreneur hub versus certain other areas in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, it's like the new age company men. I often think of people who get paid really well at these tech companies. Basically, the companies have some formula around, okay, we got to pay this person this much and give them this much free food and give them these types of benefits, and that'll reduce our percentage of the number of people that spin off and go become entrepreneurs. And we actually see that, when there's a recession and companies have to lay off 10, 20% of their staff, as we saw over the last couple of years, all of a sudden there's thousands of companies that are born, and the rate of entity creation in the US spikes when that happens, because all of a sudden there's all these super capable, super smart people in the market that are realizing their value.
Well, that's what happened to Shopify in 2008.
Is that right?
Yeah, all of a sudden they started seeing all these Shopify stores popping up left and right, and it was because people lost their jobs and didn't have a choice, and they started to create businesses.
Oh, I didn't know that tidbit. I want to go back to what you shared because it's something that's also on my mind. You went through this journey. It certainly wasn't easy, but it was kind of your first swing at entrepreneurship, and it was very successful. And when did you sell the company?
About 5 years ago.
5 years ago. So you sold the company 5 years ago, and now you're thinking of starting things again, or I guess you sold the company 5 years ago and you've started a couple of businesses and projects since then. But there is now this shadow which didn't exist before, the shadow that you created. Have you felt apprehensive going back in, and kind of how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, I would say that it's much easier when you have nothing to lose as a first-time entrepreneur than somebody who has proven themselves in the past and then looking to do another business, a second mountain. The way that I dealt with this was, well, I would say initially it's a great question.
Yeah.
I
guess first things first, do you feel apprehensive? Do you feel that pressure? Or were you feeling it in the last few years?
So yeah, I absolutely have been feeling a lot of pressure around the next business because I have a lot of friends who have great companies, very successful businesses. They're operating day in, day out. And to get back there, as you're well aware, it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of capital. And so the question is, the version of me 7 years ago had the fire to go out and spend all of his time on a plane, traveling around the country, around the world to build the business. I don't have that luxury. I don't think I could do that. So I almost think, would the version of myself from 7 years ago, is that a better entrepreneur than version 2.0, 2.0 Cole?
Yeah.
And I obviously it makes you have to be smarter, you have to be better with resources. I have, I should say, a bigger network. There are a lot of advantages I have versus back then. So when it comes to building your second business, part of you wants to say I can just snap my fingers and then all of a sudden, I have a business within let's say a few years, that's operational, successful, growing, thriving. But of course, as it relates to the first few years, especially on a new business, there's finding product market fit and making every mistake in the book and lots of resistance, a lot of people saying no. And so looking at a lot of my friends who are operating very successful businesses and saying, okay, well, I'm somewhat jealous. To a certain degree, it's hard to say that without feeling a little silly about it. But knowing that what it takes to get there again and knowing where I am today, the idea of getting on a plane, the idea of spending all my time traveling around the world, building my second thing, it's certainly a challenge and something that I would realistically say is quite difficult. So. Yeah. As a result, what's changed in terms of my mentality is rather than starting a company, building a company, I'd prefer to buy an already successful company or a company that's already established and then help to grow that company in a way that I have a skill set that I can apply to really establish it as a growth and thriving company.
Yeah, so maybe take something that's already there, already working, because you don't really have the time or maybe even the energy, frankly, to just push until you find that product market fit. You're saying, I'll buy into the product market fit and then I can apply the skills and knowledge that I do have, which I didn't have back then, to scale this thing up.
That's exactly right. Taking a business from 0 to 1, as you know, is really difficult.
It's really painful. I really hope never to have to do it again. Yeah. Like the product market fit time took me years for both of my businesses. And when I learned that you could skip that by buying a business, I said, yes, please.
I couldn't agree more. And as you're well aware, what's happening right now is you have this silver tsunami, this wave of really wonderful entrepreneurs who are getting ready to retire. Very few have a succession plan. A lot of times the entrepreneur is going to have to end up closing their company because they're going to wait too long to sell and they're going to miss their window. So I think that in terms of the time right now, it's an interesting opportunity to look at acquiring a company as opposed to, as you said, starting your own business and having to struggle to find product market fit for potentially years. And in the end of the day, you might fail. Yeah. Which is something that is even more painful as it relates to the start.
Give us a plug. What type of businesses are you looking to buy right now?
So my company is Zuvi Investments. We're an investment fund that focuses on acquiring lower mid-market businesses. What we look for is manufacturing companies that are based in Southern California that have a B2B sales channel, and ideally something more industrial-centric. And that's the way in which we're really looking to invest our capital, and the goal is to acquire a portfolio of these.
Okay, awesome. And how do you want people to reach out to you if they run one of these awesome B2B manufacturing companies?
Feel free to just hit me up on LinkedIn. Okay. I'm active and excited to connect.
Like, it seems like you're dabbling in politics while also trying to build a huge business. What's going on? Like, what's kind of under the water there that I'm not seeing?
Sure. Okay. So when I was in San Francisco, we built the company in San Francisco. Obviously, SF has changed quite dramatically in the last really 15 years. And when I was still living there, I felt a need to get involved. And so in my mind, the best way to do it was to become the mayor. And so I started the process of running for mayor. But then...
What year is this?
This was in 2018.
Okay.
And so I hired a political consulting firm to help me start the process. And then something crazy happened. I came down to Southern California for a date. Unfortunately, the date didn't work. I should say fortunately, the date didn't work out. But I rediscovered how amazing LA was. Yeah. And very quickly on, I moved to LA. And that fully destroyed or dashed my dreams of becoming the mayor of San Francisco, which I don't think would have worked out to begin with.
You would have had a crazy ride. peak through COVID. It would have been wild. I'm glad you moved down to Los Angeles. So what are you thinking
Same
now?
here. Well, what's happened, as I'm sure you're well aware, is LA has been in the news a lot, and there's a lot of crazy politics here.
It's chaos. If you live in a different country, you think the whole place is on fire.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of friends who either complain and then don't vote, or they unfortunately have moved to Austin or Miami or a different city.
They'll be back.
Absolutely. And they're going to be surprised how much more expensive property prices are.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things I felt was, okay, well, if everyone's complaining and nobody's really eliciting action, well, I better get involved and see if I can make an impact. And I had the idea that I would get involved mostly on the state level, but as I was going through down this rabbit hole, it was pretty apparent that the first place to start was West LA, which is where I live.
Mm-hmm.
And LA is kind of a funny city in the sense that it's a very distributed power structure. It's not like Chicago or New York where the mayors hold most of the power. The power, especially as it relates to the police or enforcing the laws, which is somehow a controversial topic, that's held by a lot of these council members. And so I first got involved in this council member race where we identified a really amazing person who was running for the council seat, and we were able to help to support and get her to ultimately win.
What's her name? I feel like I met her.
Tracy Park.
Yes, Tracy Park.
Yeah.
She seems like a force to be reckoned with.
She's a force, and she's somebody who we're going to see in other positions of power in the future because she's just amazing. And she's not ambitious in the sense that right now she's highly focused on West LA, but really excited to think of her career trajectory because there's just so much she's accomplished so far in a very short period of time and so much that I know she's capable of. So, yeah, really excited about that. But what happened is I got involved in West LA politics, and then ultimately once Tracy won, it became apparent that all the different districts are connected. Mm-hmm. And so all of a sudden District 4 needs help, District 6 needs help, and then going from there, it's the DA race. And so somehow I found myself somebody who, wanted to get involved to really being kind of really focused on LA politics. And hopefully other people will do the same because it's crazy where you have 20 to 25% of the voter base making the decision who is in these leadership positions. That's when crazy. These leadership positions are critical in terms of how they affect our daily lives.
Sure. Your school dollars, your police dollars, your firefighter dollars, your streets. Like, are there going to be bike lanes? Is there going to be public transportation? And most people are just kind of like, you know what? I'm going to let somebody else decide.
But at the same point, they still complain about it.
Sure, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, it affects us every day.
It's like they'd rather talk about it, and I think it's better to do something about it.
Yeah, I have a ton of respect for that. So it sounds like you're putting some work behind candidates that you believe in, but you're also building a business at the same time. Is there a world where you take one of these seats, or you for now are going to be working in the background for the foreseeable future?
I think I'm going to be working in the background for the foreseeable future. I think that is a conversation that I'd have to have with my wife. And my guess is that she is not going to want me in politics, especially on the state level. It would require us to move to Sacramento. And it's a great place. They have a wonderful marathon, December 3rd, which is coming up. But ultimately, that is not where I'd want to live full time.
I got it. Yeah, you just introduced me to one of the district attorney candidates, and my one observation was that he looked exhausted. He has a full-time job, and he has to go kind of door to door to these dinners, getting to know potential donors and potential voters. And I really respect him, and I really hope that the district attorney in Los Angeles is replaced. But I didn't envy him for sure.
And this is just the beginning of his campaign.
Yeah.
I mean, once the campaign gets running, the runoff is done in March. My God, this guy is going to be 24 hours a day for almost 6 months. So,
okay, yeah, he just looked like he actually finished a marathon. So maybe he's got like 100 marathons ahead of him.
Well, he's on mile 1.
Yeah,
he just finished the first mile. He's got 25.2 to go.
Yeah. Oh man. Well. I'm rooting for him. Cole, this has been great. You're a good friend. I feel so blessed that somebody introduced us maybe a year ago now, and you've pulled me into your amazing orbit. So thank you so much. This was great.
Well, the feeling is mutual, and I'm just so glad to know you and to consider you a good friend. And this has been amazing, and I hope that everyone enjoyed listening to this podcast.
Awesome. Next episode of Boring Businesses. I'm your host, Sieva Kozinsky. Thank you for watching or listening today. Any resources we mentioned during the show, we'll make sure to link in the show notes or below the video. If you're listening to this on Apple or Spotify, please leave me a review. It really helps me learn, and it allows other people to discover the podcast as well. Thanks again, and make sure you hit the subscribe or follow button if you haven't already. I'll see you next time.